All right, Job chapter 12, let's call this one Chipping Away Through Exposure, as Job is going to start this chapter off with what seems to be a little bit of sarcasm as he opens his response to Zophar with the statement that surely wisdom will die with you. Not seeming to think that wisdom's actually going to die with Zophar, he is going to go on to say that, look, Zophar, I am not inferior to you, and my wisdom is not necessarily inferior to yours. More importantly, one who is privileged may not be in a position to understand one who is suffering misfortune, something we've referred to previously. Job is simply going to call out now, and he's going to essentially seem to say, in my paraphrase, therefore you will have to forgive me if I'm a little bit disturbed by the fact that I am in this miserable condition while I can't help but watch the ways in which thieves and those who completely disregard God seem to be A-okay. Not only that, but as we've already mentioned, the things that Zophar in particular has said are not brand new. They're kind of redundant. And Job is going to bring that out by saying, look, the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, the fish in the sea, and even the bushes on the ground know that all these things are under God's control. So you're not saying anything brand new, but Job is going to make a mistake by not being able to distinguish the fact that these things are under God's control from the fact that, once again, Job's going to make it clear that he thinks that God is literally doing these things to him when, going back to chapter 2, God has simply put Job in Satan's hand. Job is going to go further and show us that he is not far away from the answer that he seeks, which kind of seems to be a tragic side to the fact that he still thinks that God is doing this to him, but it's not going to be tragic because, of course, as we keep referencing the end of the story, it ends well because Job, even if he doesn't wait pretty, he waits effectively until he gets an answer from God that helps him understand that God was not the one who was attacking him. And so as he goes through the end of the chapter, he is going to once again talk about God's power, but not just his power, but his ability to confound even the wisest of men. And Job seems to understand that that includes him as well, but he is not making the connection that God may be doing something that defies his understanding. Therefore, his belief that God is doing this to him is stuck in an old conception of the way that God might have worked in the past, that does not effectively describe what God is allowing right now. And I think what I used to see in some old war movies helps me to understand the innovation, as we mentioned in a previous chapter, that God is bringing in the way that he is allowing Satan to attack Job. See, because by exposing Job to this level of attack from Satan, we are getting to see what Satan looks like when he's really got his gloves off. And those old war movies gave me an interesting insight from a civilian perspective of what it's like to draw out enemy fire, understanding that even though there might be some sophisticated ways to draw out enemy fire and have them disclose where their positions are held, sometimes the old-fashioned way is basically giving them somebody to shoot at. Nobody wants to be that person, but in order to be able to get at the enemy's positions, you have to know where they're shooting from. And the sad irony of Job's situation is Satan might be able to trip up lesser men with fewer tricks, but because Job was so resolute and devoted to God, the enemy might have quite possibly had to go deeper into their bag of tricks to try to make Job stumble. Therefore, in using Job or exposing Job to the enemy, we got to see not only what Satan looks like with his gloves off, but we quite possibly might be getting a better look at his positions or the positions from which the enemy fires on a person's life and looking at the way that he attacks Job, suffering not so much for himself, but in a way that allows all of us to understand two things. One, what it's like when we get ourselves out into a position where the enemy is at his strongest, understanding that God never promised to provide us the same protection wherever we stray. To the contrary, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount roughly concluded it by saying, look, there are two paths. There's a narrow, straight path that leads to life and true safety, but the broad path, you can wander wherever you want, but there's no promise of safety out there. And so what God is helping us to see is in those circumstances where we wander off into a place where the enemy is actually much stronger than we might have ever imagined, Job is helping us understand how to get back to places of safety where the enemy is not at his strongest. But as we mentioned before, Job is at a position where no matter what he does, things aren't getting better. So the other thing he is helping us understand again is the way to wait effectively until help arrives. Something those old war movies also helped me to realize, and that is the value of learning to wait until help arrives on the battlefield, understanding that even the best soldiers can't always fight themselves out of the situation that they are in. Job, once again, is helping us twofold, understand how to get back to a path of safety and wait. We've done everything that we can do, and it's still not good enough. But in the next chapter, we are not only going to get a chance to see what Satan looks like with his gloves off, we're going to get a chance to get another look at how Job responds to his friends once they now feel comfortable addressing him with their gloves off. And Job is going to make an interesting observation that even though they seem to all have this great love for God, the way that they're treating him with their gloves off is probably a great indication of what they really think about God.